Welcome to Is It the Podcast? From Rembrandt to Rubens, from Van Dyck to Van Eyck, each episode examines an artwork with an uncertain authorship, in dialogue with a leading guest expert. We'll tell the story of the artist we suspect created the work, of the work in question, and then we reveal the results of a cutting-edge AI authentication analysis performed by the Swiss firm Art Recognition. I'm your host, Professor Noah Charney. So, is it? Today's story begins with one of the most irresistible phrases in the art world. Previously unknown works, this time by Jean-Michel Basquiat. Basquiat is one of the defining artists of the late 20th century. Born in Brooklyn in 1960, the son of a Haitian father and Puerto Rican mother, he first became known in New York through the graffiti duo Samo, before exploding into the gallery world in the early 1980s. His paintings look raw and urgent, but they are dense with references: crowns, skulls, heroic black figures, anatomy, jazz, boxing, racism, capitalism, and art history. He died in 1988, just 27 years old, which means his body of work is finite, fiercely contested, and enormously valuable. In 2017, one of his 1982 paintings sold for $110 million. So when the Orlando Museum of Art presented 25 supposedly unknown Basquiats in 2022, the stakes were enormous. The exhibition was called Heroes and Monsters. The story was irresistible. Basquiat had supposedly sold the works directly to television writer Thaddeus Mumford Jr. for $5,000 in Los Angeles in 1982, and Mumford had put them into storage where they remained unseen for decades. But almost immediately questions arose. The provenance was shaky. Some experts had doubts. One work was reportedly painted on a FedEx box with a typeface that appeared to date from after Basquiat's death. Then in June 2022, the FBI raided the museum and seized all 25 works. Later, auctioneer Michael Barsman admitted that he and another man had created fake Basquiats around 2012, artificially aged them, and attached them to the false storage locker story. It was a scandal about forgery, yes, but it was also about belief, value, institutional authority, and the way a good story can make doubtful objects seem real. To help unpack this, I'm joined by Magnus Resch, art market economist, entrepreneur, professor, and best-selling author, whose work focuses at the intersection of art, data, reputation, and value. Magnus also has a new app out, an art and value identifier called Magnus, and listeners will get access to the beta version, so stay tuned for your download code. Joining us as well is It regular Carina Popovici, founder of Art Recognition, the Swiss company using artificial intelligence to help authenticate works of art. So today, the Orlando Basquiats, a blockbuster exhibition, a perfect-ish provenance story, an FBI raid, a confession, and one big question. When everyone wants a work to be real, who is willing to ask, is it? Magnus, Carina, welcome to this episode of Is It the Podcast? Today we're talking about Is It a Basquiat? And Magnus, can you begin by telling us why you chose this artist and this case study for us to focus on today?
I chose this case because I like Basquiat, but also because it sits at the intersection of money, authenticity, and power. It shows how the art world decides what's real and what happens when the process breaks down. So I spoke about money. What happened here is you can literally watch experts, museum journalists, art historians, PhDs collectively create millions of dollars before knowing if the work is actually real. I spoke about authenticity. So in this case, we have all the smart people, the museum staff and so on, looking into it, forensic analysis, provenance research, and all of them point into a different direction. And then there's Carina who comes and says, hey, we looked at this. Most likely it's not real. And third, I spoke about power. So this case reveals very much how the art market runs on belief and hype. And that's what fascinates me. The market started pricing the possibility that these were Basquiats. And the entire story is really about trust and not the actual art.
It definitely is. It's fascinating. And During the opening voiceover, I explained some of the details of the case. But now I'd like to ask you, Carina, Basquiat's style is really distinctive. It's fast, raw, graphic, and deliberately unstable. Does that make him especially difficult for AI authentication, or can those very features actually be useful signals for the model?
So what's interesting about Basquiat is that this speed and this instability that you are mentioning doesn't necessarily make it less analyzable. And in fact, it might actually create opportunities for the AI, if I can say so, to see the artist's hand. And let me explain what I mean with this. Because all of this marks, fast, uneven, crossed out, being deliberately unresolved. So these qualities, they might look unstable at first, but they are also deeply expressive because they are revealing a certain personal rhythm, the hesitation, so the entire process, the entire creation. And for the AI models, these so-called imperfect areas can be very valuable, actually, because they contain this traces of the personal execution, what makes Basquiat special. And so this rawness and the speed is a challenge, but it's also an opportunity because a forger, it can imitate Basquiat symbols, its rawness, but it is much harder to actually reproduce the full chain of those fast decisions and changes on a surface. So in this sense, the AI model is not just looking at what is represented, but how a work is built. And I think this is really fascinating and important to understand.
It is. And it's one of the things that I like about the approach to teaching the AI how to understand and recognize an artist's hand. It's okay if the artist works in various styles, and idiosyncrasies are actually a plus. You might think that an artist who repeated the exact same format over and over again would be easier to identify. But even art historians with the naked eye might have trouble telling a Perugino from a Raphael from a Pinturicchio because all the faces look exactly the same. And so the idiosyncrasies are actually to our benefit when we turn to AI analysis.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So Magnus, this story has so much fun stuff in it, and it's got lost cache of maybe lost treasures in a famous deceased artist, a discovery in a storage locker, and this relatively modest initial purchase price and potential vast fortunes if they prove authentic. And from the perspective of market psychology, we get really drawn into these stories that sound too good to be true. We do, I say, as the general public, not necessarily the general public who are buying works of art. You live at the heartbeat of the art trade and are surrounded by collectors all the time. Do people who are collecting regularly get the same sense of this is an amazing treasure hunt and I must see or have these objects that the general reader who might read like a New York Times feature about a story like this might have?
I mean, everyone is always looking for the too good to be true discovery, right? The find, the overlooked treasure, the dramatic rediscovery. That's what every collector wishes to have. Everyone likes to win the lottery. I think that's very human. And these stories then get highly publicized because they combine scarcity, luck, status, money, and it's that deep desire that everybody wants to find and rediscover a multi-million-dollar masterpiece in usually the attic or a storage locker. And this is exactly what happened in this story. So it combines all these different elements that we were always looking for.
Do you find that for a major art historical figure with a strong market, does it make forgery more likely in your experience? So are there more forgers apt to forge big name artists? And I ask the question because it seems logical that they would, but then big name artists and big prices will come under more scrutiny. So it may be that they're more likely, but it would be wiser for them to try to do a low mid-range anonymous 17th century Dutch seascape that's worth 100,000, but nobody's going to really look too hard at because it's not so noteworthy. But in your experience, are the bigger names more likely to lead forgers to attempt to create works to feed the market?
Yes. I always tell my friends when they buy a work for $10,000, $20,000 and they call me and say, Magnus, I didn't get a certificate of authenticity. I didn't get a inked handwriting from the artist proving that the work is real. I always say, relax. Most likely, you will never be able to resell this work again. That's the 99.9% chance that this work will never gain in value and you will not be able to sell it. So don't care about provenance. However, when it comes to a Basquiat, here prices are very different because high prices create incentives. The stronger the market, the more people search attics, storage units, family collections for lost works. Oh, I think my grandma, I hear these stories all the time. My grandma, I think it's a real Basquiat, but then it's just a poster, right? And these stories. So the higher the prices, the more questionable works emerge. And with Basquiat, it's a truly global market. The visual language is instantly recognizable. And we all know a newly discovered Basquiat can be worth millions overnight. So that's the kind of economic reward that exists and that attracts the market and these discoveries.
And since we are during the Art Basel month, and as we know, and as you know very well, Magnus, I think that every Art Basel produces a handful of story that everybody wants to agree on. You remember in 2021, we had the Beeple moment where everybody was going crazy after NFTs. Then we had the frenzy around the artists under 40 in 2022. Now we have the woman artists that are on the rise. So what I've been wondering is how can the art market participants distinguish between like genuine validation, like real art authentication and this collective enthusiasm that arises during big art events such as Art Basel, which is now approaching?
Yeah, the art world runs on sentiments, on hype. That's why you have so many artists who go through the roof. Their prices, they score record prices. And then a year later, their prices are a disaster. So that's kind of the logic of the market. Historically, it used to be much slower. So you had 7 years cycle of these hype artists. Now it all happens within 12 months. There is no solution for this. The art market, especially at the high-end segment, is all about investing. The traditional collector, I buy what I love and I don't care about the price. I bought it and I'm completely fine to overspend because it means so much to me. The real art lover, the custodian of art, that doesn't exist anymore. A new generation is looking for buying into a cultural story, into an experience, and into an investment. So we will continue to have these stories throughout. The solution would obviously be that every artwork has a very clear provenance, and those artworks at the high-end segment get checked and have a stamp of approval. Historically, estates used to do that job, but that's a very messy and difficult job. So they pulled away for legal reasons, understandably, I must say.
That brings up one of my questions for you, actually. There have been various forgery scandals involving artist estates. I remember there was one about the Basquiat estate where he had painted on the door to his drug dealer's den or apartment, and his father was on the board and didn't want to effectively give the drug dealer millions because he had retained the door that had the original Basquiat painting on it. So they denied the authenticity of a work that was actually authentic. And then there have been various scandals, like there was one about a print owned by Bruno B. from the Warhol estate and the Alexander Calder estate. These pop up periodically. Today, what's the role of artist estates and how do they work in cases like this? You mentioned that they receded in importance recently. Could you go into a little bit more detail about why that's the case and how they work today?
Well, you call him Bruno B., Bruno Bischofberger?
Yeah, that's how it was nicknamed, that particular case, the Bruno B. Warhol case.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. I like this. My second name is Bruno. So
perfect.
Bruno B. Yeah, you talked about artist estates. Very interesting. So they have one key problem, that is they don't have a definite list of works that the artist produced. their job is to preserve an artist's legacy, manage their rights, and they've often become key authorities on authentication. The challenge is that their decision can have enormous financial consequences, which is why they are frequently drawn into disputes. So historically, many states issued authentication opinions. But then, like in your case that you just mentioned, the Bruno B case, several have stopped it because of litigation risks. They just were overwhelmed by lawyers on the other side that were threatening them and said, hey, this is a real Basquiat, so authenticate it. And they're like, we don't want to pay these legal fees. And they didn't want to act as final judge if a work is real or not. And this has created a vacuum for collectors, scholars, scientists to fill and to help authenticate works. There is, when we talk about the current market, we can see how a catalogue raisonné can have a very strong impact on the price point of an artist. Look at Gerhard Richter. Gerhard Richter, someone else, not even himself, created the website gerhardrichter.com, where they listed every work that Richter produced. So way earlier than everyone else, Richter had an online website for everyone to see what he created, which became the ultimate and definite source of truth. When you look at artists like Picasso, you have 3 different catalogue raisonnés by different sources, and the family refers to one, but it's not conclusive. So Richter did this, and now he realized, I should actually own this website. It shouldn't be run by a lawyer in London. I should run this website. So there were some, we don't know it, but the website is now down. And now David Zwirner is trying to get back access to it and create their own website with Gerhard Richter's catalogue raisonné.
It seems like it would be an obvious thing. And Carina, you can tell me if this has ever happened. Has any artist estate said, if we don't want to deal with this issues of issuing certificates of authentication because it gets legally messy, to have an AI firm step in and do testing for works that are brought to the attention of an artist estate? Are you aware of any artist estate who has done that yet?
Well, we have been in contact with different artist estates, but more for the purpose of using the images for training the AI models. So there has been the discussion around this new Modigliani catalog. That's not an estate, of course, but it's a new potential authority in this space. And we had an episode where we've been discussing the situation. But, the conversations that we're having with the estates right now, they're at a different level. So at the level of, can we use those images for training? And the reactions are really mixed, because some people are still a bit scared of AI. We've been talking with the Churchill Foundation, and this seems to be very, simple people that might not want to get involved with the technology. And they said no, but then others, they were more open to it, and they have given us the training images. So it's really different, like on a case by case basis, I'd say.
It seems like an obvious thing to move forward with, but then there's the same issue that we always deal with some people are a bit hesitant, especially when they don't fully understand how AI image analysis works. But I think we're going to be getting there, and it certainly seems like it would potentially solve a problem here. With that, can I ask you to reveal the results of your test for this episode, and then we can talk through them. Tell us what you tested and what the results were.
So we have tested these 27 images. So we have passed them all through the AI model. All of them came out as negative, so as non-authentic, with probabilities ranging between 82 and 99%. So really very, very strongly negative.
Yeah, okay. And I guess that doesn't come as a surprise because that's what we would have expected. This seems like a good example of a case where AI can be the tiebreaker when experts can't agree. So this case had obvious forgeries in it, but some contested that among the Basquiats exhibited, a few were authentic, and that the mastermind, Barsman, just padded a cache of real Basquiats with some forged ones. But while AI image analysis is a good tiebreaker, it's been used in that sense, I feel like everyone would have been saved a good deal of a headache if it had been used before rather than after. So instead of a tiebreaker, if they just tested before the exhibition was agreed to as an initial line of inquiry, rather than something after the fact, there would have been a lot less headaches. I guess my question would be for Magnus, can you imagine in the near future a situation where AI image analysis is one of the first lines of defense, whereas right now it's the tiebreaker when no one else can agree on what an authentic case is, so then they go to AI. Can you imagine a near future where it becomes an initial thing? The reason that I feel like it could be good is you only need digital images of the work. You don't need the physical object. And it's relatively inexpensive compared to other testing methods, especially once an AI system has already been taught to recognize the hand of an artist. That's the time-consuming fiddly bit. And then it's relatively straightforward to test a new work against that.
Yeah, I mean, scalability is the key issue here, right? How quickly can it be done? In a perfect world, I would take a photo with my iPhone of a work, I send it to you, and within seconds, you would tell me forgery or not. Obviously, we're not there yet, but if you had told me 10 years ago that I can get my next book written through ChatGPT in 2 minutes, I would have said, that's crazy. So, Carina, I really hope, by the way, disclaimer, no, my books are not written with ChatGPT. My last book was before ChatGPT. Otherwise, I lose some readers, and that's not the purpose. I mean, eventually, I know that we will get there, right? It's just a matter of time. And once this has happened, then it will be a standard use case that before an artwork gets shown in a museum or at an art fair or anywhere, and before someone purchases it, it will become standard procedure to upload it, verify it, green, check mark, thank you, here's the invoice.
Absolutely. And let me return to your question, Noah, because I think it was quite interesting, this parallel or these reflections of where, can AI be useful? And indeed, I mean, as you were saying, there are different moments, right? So we have this later stage situation where the AI is the tiebreaker. So in the Orlando case, for example, the doubt started creeping in at some point, like you said. People started asking whether perhaps not all of them were fakes, but some of them were authentic. And in this case, I really think that AI could have helped cut through that confusion. But also, as we are discussing, the AI models can be a lot more powerful earlier in the process. Because as you were saying, if AI image analysis is used as an initial line of inquiry, it can help determining whether further investigations are needed at all. Like if a painting comes out with a score of 98% negative, do we really need, to call an expert? Do we really need to look for the provenance papers or do materials analysis or so? That's why, also in this case that we are discussing, the results, they are very, very strongly negative across the entire group. So if the AI was involved earlier, it would have raised like massive red flags, and then maybe that exhibition wouldn't have happened. I would also like to say something about the number of the works involved, because 25, it's a big number. Just think about it. Like we don't talk about 1 or 2 paintings that are doubtful for or whatever. We talk about 25. And I feel that this is extremely alarming. And this idea, that once works enter a museum, they don't just gain market value, but they also start entering art history. So students go to school, they are learning this. So I do feel that AI, it's not meant just to resolve the disputes, but to act like some kind of early warning system, especially if like a big work of, we have like a 50, Warhols or something all of a sudden. And as you said, Magnus, and I fully agree with you, of course, this is a very highly scalable tool. The AI models, they can screen very quickly, very consistently a large number of works. Okay, we're not at seconds yet, but you might need a week, 2 weeks, whatever. Certainly you don't need to wait for years. And I think it's really important to realize that, if this is done before exhibitions, before these paintings or art enters the market, the AI doesn't protect just the institutions themselves or the collectors who buy them or whatever, but really the historical record itself.
Where else do you see AI having an impact on the art market?
There were a couple things that I had in mind. I'd actually be curious about your thoughts, Magnus. One is I study European Old Masters. A lot of the people that I know were asking if AI facial recognition could help identify models or historical figures who appear in paintings. And that's probably not of economic interest, but it's certainly of interest to people who are researching these historical artists. The other thing that I had that I'm curious your thoughts on, I had this idea that what if a contemporary artist still living today wanted to ensure his or her legacy by working with an AI image analysis company to help them train to identify that living artist's hand so that 100 years from now, if a work supposedly by that artist comes onto the market, they have an already trained and certified AI firm that can check against the verified hand of the artist that has been stored at this AI firm. Could you imagine contemporary artists basically helping secure their own legacy, almost in lieu of or in addition to an artist's estate, by working with an AI image analysis company?
Could I imagine it? Different question than does it make sense? So does it make sense? Absolutely. A lot of things make sense in the art world, right? I mean, registering artworks on the blockchain, paintings, totally makes sense for artists because they make royalties from every transaction of this work. Right now, they don't make a cent from secondary market translation. Yes, the smart listener will say, yeah, but they get their royalties agreement in the UK and California. Yeah, right. You get paid out 5 years later. Good luck. What is it? 2%? Thank you. So yeah, if they would get royalties on every transaction only because their artwork is registered on the blockchain, that already would make a key difference to them and to their revenue stream. Are artists doing it? No. They think this whole NFT blockchain thing is a joke. Artists could make way more money if they would put up prices online. And that's kind of what makes it fun and entertaining and also different to other industries. So to answer your question, would it make sense? Yes. Is it likely that artists will do it? Probably not for the reasons that I just stated. I would highly recommend it for every artist. I would highly recommend them to immediately start doing a catalogue raisonné. So making sure that every work that leaves the studio is registered on an online, publicly accessible website. Just to keep it simple, we don't need to put it on the blockchain. I know that's maybe a big to ask, but put it on a website. And then training a system like Carina's, wow, that's next level. That would be fantastic. That would be Artist 3.0. But, we are now still at 1.0. It's cool to be poor as an artist. I highly disagree. I think artists should make a lot of money. Artists should be more entrepreneurial. It's totally fine to be very rich as an artist because you deserve it. Companies like Carina's and mine and your books, we are all in it for the long game. Investors who come and invest in the art world and think they can compare it to any other industry, it's not going to happen. For art tech companies, but also for art. I mean, look at the Pollock. Look at the Pollock that just sold for 180 million. Big news stories, Wall Street Journal, art market is back, record prices and so on. Well, 180 million. So the guy bought it for 30 million, 20 years in 2004, I think. So that is over roughly 22 years. That's an increase, which sounds like a big number, right? Of something like 150 million. If you break it down, however, on an annual return, that's around 5 to 6%. Now, if I had put that same money, the 30 million that I initially bought it into the S&P 500, the most boring thing, I would have had a larger return. So everything in the art world, if we're just in it for short-term gains or making money fast, it's not going to work. It's either not going to work or it ends you in prison like we've seen in this case here with the Basquiat.
Before I ask my last couple of questions, Magnus, I understand you have a new app as we're recording this. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's very new. The idea is I'd like to convert more art lovers into art buyers. And I believe that transparency is the key. What you are doing with your company, Carina, is exactly towards the same mission. We are making the art market more transparent to make it more liquid. So to increase confidence. The number one reason why people are not buying is the lack of transparency. I don't know if this work is real. I don't know if this price is overpriced. I don't know if I'm able to sell it again. It's all about confidence, and we need to increase confidence. You're doing it at the higher end level. I'm looking at the broad audience of art lovers. And what I'm doing is I build an app that works like Shazam for art. It's free. You take a photo and you immediately know who the artist is. Now, smart listeners will say, yeah, but ChatGPT can do it and Google can do it. Yes, they can. But we do it faster, and we provide the price, and we provide comparable prices, and you store it in one location. Try this with Google and ChatGPT. And by the way, we tested it. Our matching rate is 3 times larger than ChatGPT and better than Google. Plus, again, we provide the prices. And also another feature, it has a map. So it shows you all the galleries and museums around you. And using AI, Carina, you said it before, as a discovery tool, based on the photos that you are taking, we tell you where to go. Ask ChatGPT or Google, put in gallery. Where should I go? They always tell you the same thing. Go to the MoMA, go to the Whitney, go to the Guggenheim. They don't tell you about the galleries that actually fit to your taste and to your price budget. So this is what we're doing. And since you've been listening to this podcast and made it so far into the podcast, I'm giving out an access code so you can access the app right now. It's still in a private beta, but with this code, you can actually use the app. And the code is NOAH50. So NOAH 50. The name of our host today with 50, small or capital letters, doesn't matter. Try out the app. We have a long waiting list of thousands of people. And with this code, you can get in directly. Sorry for this little plug, but as you can hear, I'm very excited. And we just launched it. It's the largest price database. And it's one goal, making the market more transparent. So you guys finally find art that you like.
And what's it called, Magnus? That's the one thing that we have missing.
Well, it's not called Bruno B, but it's called Magnus.
It sounds fantastic. And I love how you're so passionate about it. I'm going to download it right away. Okay, circling back just to end our episode with some questions related to our topic. Carina, so the story goes that some of the quote unquote Basquiats that we analyzed were found in a storage locker and sold on eBay, possibly even some of those that later ended up in the museum exhibit itself. So online auction sites, we know they're full of fakes and forgeries. If you look for ancient coins or pre-Columbian, you're going to get lots of hits that are either not what they're purported to be or looted. So how do platforms like these auction site platforms, I just stopped myself because I've done enough TV shows where I'm not supposed to say the name of the brand. so auction websites, popular auction websites that you've definitely heard of, how do they contribute to the spread of forgeries, and what could you imagine AI doing about this?
So as the news broke a couple of years back, I think the name of this platform was very explicitly spelled out. So I think we can say that we're talking about eBay. Okay. So it's really crazy to imagine that some of these works were actually sold on eBay first. And it's really true. I mean, if we were to believe the investigators. So there are different considerations here. As it has been said already a couple of times, I think this scandal is really a very good example of how vulnerable the art market can be when there is a strong demand for a particular artist, but very limited mechanism for this independent verification. So the vacuum that we've been talking about earlier during the discussions. And we really need to, again, realize that it's a problem. The fact that works that eventually made it into a major museum have actually circulated on eBay. And this illustrates how blurred the boundary is between the lower and the upper end of the art market. We have an experience with this actually. So a couple of years back, we have actually downloaded paintings from eBay and we've analyzed them. There were about 40 pieces. Everything came out fake. The case was covered by The Guardian back then, and there were big names. I mean, it's really crazy to imagine that somebody was selling a Monet on eBay for 500,000 and somebody else was buying it, but it really happened. And at that time, there was this typical reaction from many people saying that, everybody knows that eBay is selling fakes and whoever buys them, they are naive, uneducated, whatever. But I really think, and this case shows that the issue is more complex than that, actually, because an artwork that's being sold on eBay, it doesn't necessarily remain an eBay problem, because over time it starts moving. So it moves through the market, it changes hands, it gains a history, and then eventually, a few years later, it appears in a more serious context. And there you have it. At that point, what begins like an, online marketplace little thing that nobody is taking seriously might turn into a gallery problem or an auction problem or a museum problem, as we've seen in this case. And again, because we've been talking about the fact that AI is scalable, that's one case where we really see that scalable tools are very useful and really needed, because when things are being put online, they stay there for a couple of weeks. Like really no expert would have the time to look into this properly. But with the AI, you just download them, you pass them through the model, you have the result in like a half an hour. And so this can really help to identify these works early in their life cycle before they even start like acquiring this legitimacy through circulation, through changing hands, to presence in the museum. So at the end, everybody benefits.
Magnus, what do proper collectors make of eBay? Are any of them browsing eBay while they're, on the commute to work in the backseat of their limousine? Or is this a no-go zone for anyone who's a proper art collector?
Yeah, it's a no-go zone. Proper art collectors, they buy predominantly from the big auction houses and the big galleries. It's very limited. There are 20,000 galleries. They buy from 5 to 10 galleries. And there are 1,500 auction houses. They buy from 4, maybe 2, really, if you narrow it down. And there are 300 art fairs. They buy from 5. So it really is at the top. And eBay is not part of this.
So I'm going to end with one short story that probably is not one you heard about, Magnus, because it's where I live in Slovenia, and this probably didn't make international headlines, but it reminded me of this Orlando museum case. So a few years ago, there was a Croatian family that had a large collection of paintings that were meant to go on display at the National Museum of Slovenia. And the exhibition was curated, set up, the pieces sent on loan. And there was the media preview the day before the exhibition was set to open. And members of the media with no training immediately saw that there was something wrong with the works being displayed, that they did not look like they were by the big name artists, including people like Modigliani and Giacometti. It was obvious that they were forgeries. But the museum had somehow not registered this. And so they canceled the exhibition before it opened to the public, but not until the media day had previewed. And what it appeared to be a case of was the estate that presented these forgeries was trying to get the imprimatur of the paintings having been displayed at a big museum in order to sell them and basically to pimp the provenance. That would be a good name for one of our next books, Pimp the Provenance, to make it sound compelling. And it didn't work this time, but shame on the museum for not recognizing it earlier. But my question then is, what's the economic function of a museum exhibition in transforming a doubtful object into a marketable one? I remember back with the National Gallery in the UK, their Leonardo exhibit, they didn't show La Bella Principessa because they were worried that it was going to be sold on the wings of the exhibition and they didn't want to provide market opportunity. So what's the role of museum exhibitions?
Yeah, museums don't just display art, they create legitimacy. A museum exhibition acts as a powerful signal that experts take that work very seriously. That institutional validation often becomes part of the artwork's value. So when an artwork is part of a certain museum exhibition, it increases in value, even though the same work, maybe it's an edition, and that is not part of a museum show, receives a much lower price. The irony is that museums are not authentication bodies, yet many collectors treat museum inclusion as proof of authenticity. Once a work enters a respected institution, doubts often decrease and market confidence increases. That's why when you look at sales pitches of galleries, you often find pictures of the work in museum exhibitions, and part of the provenance always lists the exhibitions. So in economic terms, museums reduce uncertainty, and reducing uncertainty creates value.
Okay, for our very last question for you, a brief one, and I really appreciate your spending so much time with us. Carina, you too, this has been a really fun episode. Magnus, what should a responsible collector, museum, or insurer do when the potential upside of acquiring an object is enormous, but the authentication evidence is mixed? What do you recommend if somebody asks you, this sounds like it might be too good to be true. How should I check to make sure it isn't?
Call Carina. Obviously, that doesn't apply to lower end works because their forgeries rarely exist. But the moment, when you buy a house, you have experts walking through the house and doing checkups. Why don't we do a proper due diligence when buying an artwork?
This is a great place to end our episode. Thank you so much both for your time. Carina, it's always great to have you on the show. And Magnus, what a treat to do this with you. And everyone should go and download the Magnus app as soon as possible and also order Magnus's wonderful books.
Thanks for having me. That was great.
Thank you so much, Noah.
Thanks for listening to Is It? The Podcast. This series is produced by Urshka Charney, presented by Noah Charney, and is brought to you by Art Recognition. Based in Zurich, Art Recognition is the leading firm for AI-driven authentication of artworks. Featured everywhere from the art newspaper to Wired to The Guardian and beyond, Art Recognition uses the most definitive, sophisticated datasets and advanced processes to estimate the likelihood that a specific artist created an artwork. Backed by a multidisciplinary team that takes many dimensions of research into consideration, Art Recognition has a long track record of success at the highest level. Learn more at art-recognition.com. That's art-recognition.com. We'll be back next time with a new art historical mystery, a new possible artist behind the masterpiece, and a new guest expert. See you next time.